So thank you for joining us for Increasing Discourse in the Classroom. My name is Sherry Zub, and I'm one of the math consultants at Wayne Risa. I'll let my friends and colleagues introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and thank you for spending the afternoon with us today. My name is Heather Roderman, and I'm an assessment and instruction consultant with Wayne Risa.
And my name is not Michelle Wagner. You'll notice I'm wearing a baseball hat today. My name is Rich Bachelor, and I'm pinch hitting for our esteemed colleague, Michelle Wagner.
And again, thank you for joining us today. We're still letting a few people in.
Yep.
So bear with us as we do that. So as we get started, just make sure that this button is red so that you can have your video paused, your sound paused, and click on the video camera to turn off your webcam.
So we have included the slide deck in the chat. Thank you, Rich. And we just
go ahead. I'm sorry, Heather.
I was just going to say, as we think about moving forward into what fall could look like, we want to consider that no matter what, if we're remote, if we're hybrid, or if we are in a face-to-face setting, that the answer really lies in our essential literacy practices.
So as we create some opportunities for student discourse, we want to think about these literacy essentials that are so important to guide our practice here. So small group instruction using a variety of groupings and strategies, often most with flexible groups formed and instruction targeted to children's observed and assessed needs in specific aspects of literacy development. Also, small group and individual instruction using a variety of grouping strategies, most often with flexible formed and instruction targeted to children's observed and assessed needs in specific aspects of the literacy development. Again, these are referred to in the document that my friend Heather put in the chat for you.
Remember that the literacy essentials are all through the day, which means not just for literacy time, but also during math time,
That's right.
Also during science time, also during social studies time. So every classroom, every day, all throughout the day.
So the importance of an icebreaker, it serves several purposes. First and foremost, it's just an easy way to get the kids to collaborate with each other. It's a great way to have the students feel comfortable. There are no right or wrong answers, so it sets the stage for that collaborative group work that's to come later on. So icebreakers are a great way to start any session that you're doing with your students, be it face-to-face or remote.
So we know that there is, when we go to the essentials, we look to the research-informed efforts to foster motivation and engagement within and across learners. And one way that we can do that is to provide opportunities for children to collaborate with peers during reading and writing, but not necessarily, as Rich pointed out, during the ELA or literacy block. We're thinking about other ways that we can offer these opportunities for our students. This could be done through social studies, through science, and even mathematics, or even in the specials areas. But we want this to be an ongoing and regular practice within our classroom. So we want you to consider, how might you use an icebreaker or something really low stakes in your classroom? What might that look like?
You can also, if you don't feel like unmuting and talking, we can do what's called a waterfall in the chat. So if you have an answer to that question and you'd just like to make the chat scroll, put your answer in the chat.
Hi. I was thinking, I have a third grade classroom, and with the poll, I've been seeing a lot of stuff about kind of like just like check-ins for the kids to kind of get a feel for where they are. Maybe like in a morning meeting type situation. I think that would be kind of a way that I would try to incorporate this. I've never done that before, but I think that it kind of goes with like the way our school likes us to have morning meetings, and it'll also let us as a teacher kind of know, hey, like, you know, what type of mood is our student in, because this is a really difficult time for, I think, a lot of them. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you lifting that.
So somebody noted in the chat that it would be a great way to help with social emotional to monitor how students are feeling. Just a quick check-in like this, just like we did. Absolutely. And the best part about an icebreaker of this with our diverse group, which is our classroom community, is that everybody can participate in this kind of an icebreaker. Kids know what emojis are. They like to use them. My daughter's a 3rd grader and loves emojis. They can easily share with you how they're feeling. You can also relate this to content. You can use an emoji as it relates to your content as to the level of comfort where students are feeling like. So if you're teaching something that's really new and maybe complex, you can put up the emoji and ask students to share how they're feeling about the content. Oh, so we had a really good question, Sherry and Rich, about preschoolers. Like, how might we use this with our preschoolers? Something like this.
I like the idea of the polls where they wouldn't have to read anything. They are just choosing an image of sorts that wouldn't allow them to read the words. So just an image would be great for them to use, would be my suggestion.
We also have a question, and I think that's great, right? Our pre-readers, we need to use more visuals with that. We may even be able to supply them with the icons ahead of time where they could hold those up to a camera, and you could take a poll that way as well. Cheryl asked a good question, and because I'm not Michelle, I don't have an answer, but maybe another Google expert in the room could. And that question is there polling in Google Meet?
Ooh, good question.
That is a good question. I'm not sure if there's polling in Google Meet, but you can certainly create polls using Mentimeters. And if you go to mentimeter.com, and maybe we can pop that in the chat, that's one way that you can incorporate the poll if it's not available in the platform that you're using this coming fall. So let's talk. So this is a one-pager on the research around discourse and productive talk and what researchers have found throughout studying what happens in the classroom around student talk versus teacher talk. So Rich is going to pop a link to that one-pager in the chat. But I want to give you time to read it and digest it a bit. What's nice about this one-pager, as he's putting this in the chat, what's nice about this one-pager is that it provides a lot of information on one page, and that's easy to kind of walk through and understand. So the way we've designed it is each one of those little bubbles, those chat bubbles, represents a piece of research. So as you read the one-pager, the consider this, what's something that resonates with you? If you have a writing utensil near you, go ahead and jot that idea down. If not, go ahead and put it in the chat bar. So if something's resonating with you, go ahead and share it in the chat. Otherwise, maybe unmute yourself and go ahead and share with the group. Yes, Jason, I see you have something. Jason, did you want to share?
Let's try unmuting and see if that works. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now, Jason.
There we go. I was muted. So as a building principal, the one thing I've always shared with my staff is when we got done with a lesson and I was doing an observation, I would say, who's working harder? Whose voice is being heard most in the classroom? At the end of the lesson, if you're getting done with the end of the lesson, you're wiping your brow and going, whew, thank God that lesson's over. That tells you who is working harder in that lesson. We want to flip that. We want the teachers, the students to be getting done at the end of the lesson and having them wipe their brow going, thank God this class is over. So that just, whose voice is in the room? That's what resonated to me as I was going through this.
Absolutely. Thank you for highlighting that. That's so true. Like, who is doing the heavy lifting? Who is doing the talking? Would anyone else like to share? If you'd like to unmute, go ahead. We have a small group today. You can unmute. Otherwise, feel free to use the chat.
I think, hi everyone.
Hello.
I think student debrief or student discourse is extremely important because it really horns into what the student already knows and what they need. So you can use that to tailor your lesson to identify misconceptions among students thinking, and to identify what route you need to proceed in your teaching.
Mhm.
Ms. Johnson, that's a great point. I was thinking something very similar, that student talk is often a formative assessment opportunity. And so when we can listen to student ideas, then we can push them towards more academic understandings. But we know they come in with ideas, and it's important to open up that space to hear them.
I just have to say amen, amen to both of those answers, because we often don't listen carefully to what students are saying when they are talking, and how that can inform our instruction and where we might need to go next, or what supports or enrichments we might need to provide for our students.
Exactly. It's very clear when they start talking what their understandings and misunderstandings are, and then we're able to adjust our instruction as we need to.
So the history, as you read, the history of questioning and student talk in classrooms is really quite bleak. Research that has been done by multiple people, Flanders in the 70s, has found that 80% of the talk that happens in our classrooms is generally done by the teacher. So if you've ever done a walkthrough or gone into a classroom and just listened to just what Jason had said, who's doing the heavy lifting? It's generally the teacher that's standing and delivering the content.
Heather, not to cut you off, are you saving this? Could you save this chat and send it to us as a link? Okay,
Yes.
thanks.
Yes. So they've also found, no, you're fine. They've also found that studies that have looked at children in poverty, so schools in high poverty areas, and students that are English learners often had very little to no interaction in terms of talk within a classroom. And this discourse really just allows students to share their thinking and their current understandings around current content and topics. But it also allows students to really deepen their understanding and their reasoning skills, but also consider different points of views as they interact with different peers. Discourse is really the vehicle that for students to authentically engage and use academic and content vocabulary. They practice their active listening skills, and then they hone those social skills with peers. So even though it might look very different in the fall for some of us if we're virtual or if we're in a hybrid, or we may be even face-to-face, we can still use productive talk in a way to really get at our students' understanding, their level of understanding, and what they know and are able to do.
Heather, we have a question from Cecilia, and she's asking, would this depend on, or how would this change at different grade levels?
It really doesn't. I don't think so. I think you will use the same method, this strong, positive way for all grade levels, even though for smaller kids, you might have to modify it and become more charismatic than for the younger children to get their attention. But I think this applies to all grade levels across the border.
I would completely agree. And the level of scaffolding that might need to happen for younger students might be a little bit more. You might have to teach students, you might have to give some students some cues, some talk stems or some picture cues to help them engage. I've seen in different classrooms, I've seen table tents where teachers have put talk stems or sentence stems in the middle of the table so that students can refer to them. I think it does apply across the board, whether it be a high school, middle school, or even in the preschool. We want our kids talking.
Exactly. And it does take, you have to put the time into it. Lots of modeling and where they could actually maybe do like a fishbowl where some of the kids practice it while the other kids are sitting around and analyze what's happening. But the beauty of that, I love how you said that, it's great for all ages. You're going to see a kindergarten classroom engaging in this, and you'll see how she starts off with teaching her kindergartners how to use talk stems.
Right. Well, one more thing to add about that before we get to the example, and we are going to get to that in just a second, is many of our students in many of our classrooms have been trained in IRE classrooms. right? Which is, if for lack of a better way, it's guess what's in the teacher's head. And so the questions limit student talk. And so in my middle school classroom, what I noticed a lot was that because kids came in with that sort of training, it took a lot more effort to get the older kids engaged in discussion. And developmentally, middle school is, the number one rule is don't look stupid in front of your friends. So having said that, I think as we develop these talk moves and these skills in classrooms from the very early age, and then we continue that throughout the grades, we're going to see more engagement like this, and that's just going to be beneficial for every single student.
Okay.
So that IRE cycle that Rich is talking about is that initiate, respond, evaluate. And it goes something like this. Like, I be the teacher, I might ask Rich a question. Rich, can you tell me about mitosis?
You already picked my stick today, so I don't have to answer.
Okay, clearly a middle school example. But Rich would then think about his answer and respond to me. And then as the teacher, I would evaluate that answer and probably move on. The problem with this cycle of questioning is that I'm only interacting with one student. So I'm only gauging the level of understanding of Rich. What's going on with the other 20 kids in my classroom? I have no idea as to the level of understanding that they have with the content because I'm only engaging with one student. That's the problem with that IRE cycle. But we, like Rich said, our kids are often primed for that. They come to us with that.
So let's take a look at an example of an alternative. And so here we'll see an online class run by the real Michelle Wagner. And what we'd like you to do is, this is a very short video, but we'll watch it. And in chat, again, we'll use the waterfall technique. So I'd like you to watch the video, and what do you notice and what do you wonder?
Okay.
So if you could just watch those and put them into the chat as you think of them, we'll see how other people are thinking about the video. Ms. Johnson, do you have a question?
Hello, everyone. We're here today with Liam, and Liam has been practicing writing for information, and he wanted to share his writing with all of you and get some feedback about what he could do better. So I'm projecting Liam's writing on the screen so that you can see it. And Liam, can you share with everyone what you wrote?
Yes. One day I was going to summer camp at the rec center. There is a big forest there. There are a ton of baby acorns on the trees. I like to walk on the trails of the rec center. One of the trees died and is now just a pile of acorns.
Liam, is it okay if we ask our friends to share some ideas of how we can make that, maybe add more information to make it even more fun to listen to?
Sure.
Great. What ideas do we have? How could he make that better?
Maybe in some places, instead of just only being periods, maybe there could be like a few exclamation points.
How would that change what he was saying?
Instead of it just being like, at the forest at the rec center, there were a bunch of trees with baby acorns. It would just be like, at the trails on the rec center, there are a whole bunch of trees with baby acorns. So it would actually give it like voice. But the acorn trees aren't in the trails. They're like right in front of the trails.
So maybe that's a piece of information you could add, Liam, an extra detail. Beckett, what would you do to make this better? What information would you like him to add?
Oh, I would write more about the forest, maybe? I don't know. Yeah, what else is there and stuff.
Awesome, that's a great idea. Liam, do you think you could tell us more about what's there in your writing?
There are big trees there.
Or who is with you? And like,
No one.
Okay, thank you. Those are great ideas. Aubrey, is there any idea that you have on how they might be able to improve?
I'm just still thinking a little bit more. I have some ideas, but I don't know.
Well, thank you all. And maybe we could set up a time where Aubrey could look at it with Liam, and Liam, maybe you could read it one more time with some of the suggestions that Emma and Beckett made, and you could add even more thoughts, okay? All right, thank you, everyone. Bye.
So what did you notice about the talk that's happening there between the teachers and the students? Teacher and the students.
Sure, let me read some of the chats first.
Oh, great, thanks.
And then if anybody else has something to add, please, again, feel free to unmute. So in the chat, we noticed that the first thing that she did was ask the student if it was okay for her to share and to get peer feedback from the student whose work they were examining. Another noticing is that the students had control over the discussion and that Ms. Wagner actively acknowledged all of the students. That the small group included most of the kids were listening, and one child may have gotten off task a little bit, but there was a lot of control over, the students had a lot of self-control and taking turns. And we were also promoting, or we noticed that the students were really listening to each other and creating a learning community.
And Heather, there is one really cute little gal in there, isn't there?
She is really cute, isn't she?
That's Heather.
That's my daughter, the little one with glasses. Said she needed some more time to think.
I thought that was really great. Like a really great sign that there was some, even in this short period of time, a really, as Ms. Johnson pointed out, a learning community, because it's okay to say, I need more time to think. I thought that was a really nice moment.
Absolutely. It let us know that it was a safe place for her to say that. And that's what we have to do, be it face-to-face or virtual. We have to create that safe learning environment.
So one way that we can encourage the productive talk in the classrooms is to provide our students with talk stems. So talk stems are helpful no matter what content you're teaching or what grade level you're teaching. These stems provide a path or a gateway to access an opportunity for students to engage in accountable discourse. And it really serves two purposes. The first is that they not only allow students to engage with one another respectfully, so we're continuing to cultivate that trust within our classroom, whether it be online or in person or hybrid, but it also encourages students to engage using the academic language, right? And that's what we want our students to be able to do. We want them to engage in conversation around content, modeling the language that we're using while we're teaching. These stems also act as a scaffold for struggling students. So if you have English learners or students that are really just struggling with, even just with talking in general, or our special needs students, this is a really nice scaffold or reminder that they can fall back on to use to engage, that all kids are engaging in discourse, and it's not just some of the kids engaging. These stems really allow, they provide that equity piece, because all kids have an entry point into the conversation.
I use those in my classroom, and I had some students that were very quick to disagree with each other and just, no, that's not it. And so I often went back to, I respectfully disagree, and they loved that one. I would have people come in and just say, wow, I can't believe your students respectfully disagree with each other. And sometimes they get in heated arguments, but they would still respectfully disagree with each other. So it was pretty cute, but you definitely have to teach it to them.
Mm-hmm. And anyone else? How might you use this?
Hi. I definitely agree with what I believe Amanda was saying. And I used to use something I got off of Teacher Pay Teacher, But when I used to teach 4th grade in California, and it was so funny because I thought it was the cutest thing because it rhymed. But some of the kids got a little sensitive because they felt like it was name calling. But there was a little poster, and it was like, when we communicate with each other, we don't want to be hogs or logs. A log is you just sit in the group and say nothing, and a hog is you hog up the conversation. And I definitely, I wish I could remember, it was so long, it was like maybe 7 years ago or something, but I wish I could remember what my class came up with. And that was like so cool because kind of like what Ms. Johnson was saying about creating a community, it really did, because that class was very sensitive. And whereas my other students had no problem using that language, this class came up with their own words that they made a rhyme out of. And I can't recall what it is, but I definitely just wanted to piggyback off of what Amanda said too, just to say that I think that it's really just putting into practice and reminding them how to use it and communicate. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Well, I think you mentioned this already, Sherry, but real quick, I think we should be aware that, and I come from the science aspect, and one of the things that scientists do a lot is argue from evidence. But in many of our communities, to argue is automatically a bad thing, right? Or culturally, we may think of argumentation as a bad thing or avoid confrontation like that. And so I think these stems make a point that, and perhaps we need this more than ever, that it's okay to disagree as long as we focus on evidence and as long as we present our case to the group. We can disagree without being disagreeable. And we're also working towards some kind of common understanding or some kind of common solution to things. Mm-hmm. And that's a really important skill for all of us, not just our little kids.
Absolutely. Rich, was there anything in the chat that we needed to attend to, or are we good on that?
I noticed somebody mentioned that these could easily be utilized for meal times. So I'm thinking if you're teaching those younger kiddos, how you might incorporate some of these into those group activities. So whether it be sharing a meal or going to the grocery store or things that are done in the home, that they can certainly transfer into other things and not just content.
So what is really important, if you want this discourse to take root in your classroom, you really need to spend time with your students setting the expectations. What is going to happen with the discourse? And somebody already mentioned that respectfully word. Absolutely. We have to treat others respectfully at all times. And that means, like, so if you have a student, you know how it happens. Somebody says something that somebody finds humorous or silly and they giggle. And then that shuts the learning down for that student. And anybody else who might have been thinking that certainly isn't going to share their thoughts either. So you really need to make it clear that this is a safe classroom and we take care of each other. And we do that by being respectful to each other. Tell the kids that you expect them to participate. I love what you said. You're not a log. You're going to participate. With that, we'll stay on topic. We'll speak loudly and clearly. And we often use the term accountable talk, but we need to use accountable listening, because if I'm going to be able to absorb what another student says or understand their thinking or their reasoning, I have to listen, not just be ready to talk. So it's really important that we hit home that we have to listen, because when we're listening, then we're able to repeat the speaker's ideas. And then we can explain why we agree or disagree and use those stems that we just talked about. So this is paramount, be it face-to-face or virtual. What expectations do you have to have? There's always that to mute or not mute, because we don't want children to think that their voice is not important. We certainly want them to know that they are valued in the learning environment, but we also need to think about when is a good time to mute? When is a good time to unmute? So have those expectations prepared ahead of time and think about what is going to make the most safe, comfortable learning environment for my students. So we have a document that Rich is going to put in the chat for you. This is a document that was adapted from, it's called Classroom Discussions Using Math Talk to Help Students Learn. Now, math, I know it came from a math book, but this is good stuff no matter what way you look at it and no matter what subject you're in. Do I get an amen from Rich and Heather?
Amen.
Amen.
You get an amen, but I think it actually came from a science book. So.
Oh, okay. Well, we have it. I have in my notes. I have in my notes that it was adapted from Chapin O'Connor. the classroom using Math Talk. But you know what?
I think we can share. We can share credit.
I'll let you take half the glory, Rich. Half
It's
the
STEM.
Yeah. There you go. There you go. So what I'd like you to do now is take about a minute and a half, 2 minutes to read the goals and then see what types of questions you would ask to achieve that goal. Notice that it's goal 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no order, like you don't do one first before you do the other. So just think about the goals and then the questions to achieve that goal with your students. And then we'll talk about it. So I'm going to kind of ask these questions a little bit out of order. What is the significance of each goal? And go ahead, feel free to unmute, share what is the significance of each goal? So what is the significance of each goal? Do we have some people adding to the chat?
We do.
Can you share those with us?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So goal 1 is about ensuring that all students have a voice and are engaged.
Mm-hmm. I love the turn and talk is really so underused, and it's so powerful because it gives those kids time to rehearse if they want to say something to the group, or maybe a student doesn't know much about a particular topic and they're talking with another student who does. So that turn and talk is so important. I know it's hard to do in a virtual environment. You can do it in a breakout room, but it's really valuable when you're face to face too. Wait time. I know we're quick to run in and save the day, but we have to give wait time. We have to give them time to compose their thoughts and say it in a way that makes sense to them and so that can make sense to others.
That wait time piece is really key.
Mm-hmm.
Research suggests 3 to 7 seconds of just waiting for a student to respond, giving them that think time. And it can be even longer depending on the group of students you have. If you have students that are English learners or special needs students, you may need to go up to 10 seconds.
We've got some more responses in the chat saying that it's important that students get to say more about their thoughts without the teacher adding words to their thoughts. So that "are you saying," that revoicing move by the teacher is really important. It also gives students a chance to share and transfer their ideas with elbow partners. As we said earlier, literacy is about reading, writing, speaking, and listening. And so this is really the promotion of language development. And Jason's adding the idea, the "tell me more" move is really successful to get kids to keep sharing their ideas about that.
I totally agree. And I love how goals 1 and 3 go together. It's helping an individual student clarify and share their thoughts. And then 3 is helping students deepen their own reasoning. So why do you think that? What's your evidence? That, again, these apply to all subjects, not just ELA or math. It's everything. And then I really like goal 4, helping students engage with the reasoning of others. Why do you think he said that? Meaning he, a fellow student. Or who can explain Aisha's strategy? Something like that, to help them to think about the reasoning of another student. Why do you think they did that? Why do you think they made that error in their computation? What do you think happened there? Any questions you would add to this document? Anything you would add?
Yeah, Ms. Johnson points out that this is really an intentional way to help kids learn with and from each other. And so I'm kind of coming full circle back to that learning community. It's not just lip service. It's not just, something we read in a book that says, oh, I'm supposed to build a learning community. When teachers are engaged in this type of activity with their kids, and the kids are using those sentences with each other and having that engagement, it really is an opportunity to learn together, which is really ideal.
Absolutely. So now what we're going to do is we're going to drop into a kindergarten classroom. And this is actually a video clip from a module from the Literacy Essentials. And this is a kindergarten teacher, and we're just going to show maybe a 3-4 minute snippet of how she gets her students to use these stems to help their conversation. So what she has done earlier in the day, she has read, I think the book is called Me, Jane, and it's about Jane Goodall. And the purpose of the lesson is it's the author's purpose. Why did the author write this book? What does the author want you to know about Jane Goodall? So as you watch this video, can you just make note of the questions that the teacher asks?
Stems, and we use sentence stems to have a discussion with each other. So I'm going to read the first one just as a reminder. Can you repeat it after me so they're stuck in your brain? Can you say more?
Can you say more?
What do you mean by that?
What do you mean by that?
Can you help me understand?
Can you help me understand?
I agree with you because.
I agree with you because.
I disagree because.
I disagree because.
An example from the book is. So when you're having a discussion today about what Patrick McDonald wanted to teach us about Jane Goodall, we're going to ask that you use some of these sentence stems to talk with each other. Some ways that I prompt for discussion and keep discussion going are with sentence stems. I might say, can you show me an example of this? Or who can add on to that? Or who agrees with so-and-so? So raise your hand if you can share one thing you think the author wanted us to learn about Jane Goodall. What is one thing, Cleo, that we learned about Jane Goodall in this book, Me, Jane?
Jane Goodall likes monkeys.
Jane Goodall likes monkeys. Jane Goodall likes chimpanzees. Who can add on to that? Louis?
She liked to have some animals, and she wanted to be like a jungle watcher for chimpanzees.
She wanted to look and watch chimpanzees in the jungle. Ashlyn?
She helps them live in their habitats because they're almost extinct.
We learned from the nonfiction book we read that chimpanzees are endangered. So Jane Goodall helps keep them safe in their habitats. Caroline?
She sat in a chicken coop for 4 hours waiting for the chicken to lay its egg.
Let's look at that example from the book. Caroline shared that Jane sat in a chicken coop for 4 hours waiting for the eggs to hatch. Here she is, waiting for the eggs. And she observed the miracle. Who can add on? Who can tell us more? Michael?
She went in Africa so she could study the chimpanzees because she really liked chimpanzees, and her friend was in Africa, so she decided to go with her.
Maya, do you remember that she wanted to go to Africa to study the chimpanzees? Let's look at that page in the book. I think it was later on in the story. Here it is. Jane dreamed of a life in Africa too. What else did Patrick McDonald want us to learn about Jane Goodall? Waylon?
She wants to learn more about the chimpanzee.
I think it's a great idea to encourage kindergartners to discuss text specifically with one another, because I believe it truly promotes a love of learning. And the more they see their peers interested in a text, or the more they feel they can contribute to a conversation surrounding a text, the more they believe in themselves as a learner or a reader. And I think the more they want to read when they see that reading teaches them information or includes interesting topics. I think it just is a good motivation for them as they grow older. So Stefania, what's an example from the book that shows us that Jane's dream was to work with animals?
The drawings.
Her drawings and her journal. Who agrees with Stefania? You can use the sentence stem. I agree with you because. Ashlyn, can you use that sentence stem? Say, I agree with you
because. It looks like she cut out stuff and she drew stuff.
So let's have a conversation about the talk moves that this teacher used with these kindergarten, or if you want to talk about her process for getting these students on the way to using these talks. You can unmute or chat, either way you'd like to share. We can start with what questions did this teacher ask?
Well, I was just going to say, I like how she had them on the paper for the kids to see and reference, and then read them first, had them repeat them since they were younger. And then I think that was really helpful. Like, even like I teach 4th grade, and I'm thinking like that would be good for my kids too, you know, just to be able to have them there and reference them ahead of time. For myself too, not just for the kids. And then just all the front loading she did in general.
She did do a lovely job with that.
I also heard her, I like the fact that she asked the other student to paraphrase what another student has said, just to verify everyone's listening.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's good, because often teachers, we talk and we don't know who's paying attention, and they might look at us and be thinking about their dog. So we do have to ask questions to support if they're actually listening and understanding what we're teaching, or what's being taught.
Yeah, there's one caveat to that, Ms. Johnson, that I would add, and that is, as a teacher, you know, that who can repeat what so-and-so said move is really powerful. However, if we use it as a gotcha moment, we break that community that we already built, right? So I think that it's true. We do want to check in with folks and make sure that they're paying attention, but we also want to make sure that we maintain that classroom community spirit where we're not using the talk moves as a gotcha moment. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Yes, and by asking that question that you mentioned, Ms. Johnson, she was helping students to orient to the thinking of others. She was trying to achieve goal 2. So it's really important that we try to think about those goals when we're doing our questioning, and keep them in our forefront so that we can help these kids with their discourse and also their level of understanding. We learn from each other. We learn when other people share with us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So we've talked about how we might use this in our classroom. We've talked about how we could share the posters, how we would start with our youngest. We saw that in the video, how we'd start with our youngest learners and how it could advance up to our later learners. I think it's important that you share the stems with them, have those expectations in place, and then I think you can have some great conversations in your classrooms. So we know that we can use this in all of our subjects to have our students engaged in the content.
So what do we do when we can't connect with our students in a synchronous format? So what do we do when we can't connect with them just like we are connecting right now? We know that from a survey done from 2/3 of Michigan children, that almost 31% of our kiddos lack sufficient internet access, which really translate to just over 300,000 students in our state that we're not able to engage like we're engaging right now between March and June. So what are we going to do? We have to provide opportunities to connect with our students, even if it's doing things as simple as a phone call. How are we reaching out to our students that can't connect via Zoom, via Google Meet, via Schoology, whatever platform that you're using? But we can pick up our phone and we can connect with them and we can engage them with a conversation, just like what we're doing right now.
And I also think too, if we're asynchronous, or if the students are asynchronous, they can call each other via phone or Zoom and work on things that we have asked them to work on asynchronously.
Absolutely.
One of the teachers I was working with earlier in the spring on this same kind of idea, he mentioned that he was a high school teacher, and he said, you know, this was the biggest thing, that he was used to having constant student talk in his classroom, and he couldn't do that as well. He couldn't pick up on facial cues or things like that that are really also important for our teachers. And he made an analogy that I thought was really brilliant. He said, teaching this way is almost like being in the movie The Martian, right? You send a message and you just have to wait for the answer to come back. But teachers have come up with some really great solutions to that, including using things like Jamboard or like Google Classroom, where those sentence stems are posted and students can interact with them wherever they are, whenever they are, and then use that group talk time in a flipped way to really address some of the things that they brought up. So we're all just figuring this out, aren't we?
Absolutely.
We are, and we can even use the old-fashioned snail mail. I know in my daughter's librarian sent postcards out to her kiddos. So we got a postcard in the mail, and my daughter was so excited to get that postcard because she got a piece of mail with her name on it. I mean, that's exciting, even though it's snail mail, but that's exciting. And that's a way that we can even include some of that writing practice, going back and forth with a pen pal even. But we need to make sure that we provide those opportunities to connect until we all can be together again in a face-to-face. So we're going to leave you with this one last piece. We would like to know, what's one idea or practice or aha or takeaway that you're excited to try as you move forward into the fall? I'm going to invite you to either unmute or use the chat feature again.
A lot of people using the poll feature. Very excited about that.
The breakout room is a really nice feature to use if you want to have kids get in small groups. It's a really nice feature. You can set those breakout rooms up ahead of time. You can move kids in and out of the breakout rooms so that you have diverse groupings of kiddos. They're very easy to use. You can create the time limit. You can send messages to those breakout rooms. They're really, really, really easy. And with that, we thank you for joining us this afternoon. I know it was an hour of your time, but I hope it was worthwhile. And my colleagues and I thank you for coming and learning a little bit more about Discourse and how you can use the power of Discourse in your classroom, not only to engage students in the learning to get them thinking deeper and really build their language, but also as a formative assessment. So we invite you to complete the feedback. This just helps us to plan future sessions for you as we move throughout the school year, so that we can tailor these to really meet your needs, so that we can be partners in your learning.